Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Sam Brusco, Associate Editor of Medical Product Outsourcing and moderator for today's program. You've logged on to the MPO webinar, Accelerating Medical Device Development with Hybrid Metal 3D Printed Tooling. Before we get started, I have some housekeeping announcements. For those of you who are interested in the information you hear today once the webinar has ended, or if you'd like to forward it to a colleague, this session will be archived for a year. The archive will be able to be accessed through the MPO website, which is at mpomag.com. Also, we will be accepting questions throughout the presentation. You can type your question into the box provided in the webcast window. We will collect all questions and hold them until the end, but please feel free to type in questions as you have them. To enhance your viewing experience today, feel free to customize your window display. You can move the windows around by clicking on the top header space of each window and dragging them with your mouse. Also, you can activate the closed caption option by clicking on the CC button in your media player. Finally, share your reactions to the content being presented today with the emojis provided. Your feedback will be seen by today's speakers. And now, before I introduce those speakers, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, Spectrum Plastics Group, a DuPont Business, and Mantle Inc. Spectrum Plastics Group, a DuPont Business, is a full-service partner for the development and manufacturing of critical polymer-based components and finished devices for medical and other demanding applications. With 19 locations and more than 1 million square feet of manufacturing space in 6 countries worldwide, the company has the resources to solve customers' most challenging problems with proven quality, responsiveness, innovation, and technical expertise. Mantle has developed the only metal 3D printer built for precision tooling. Mantle automates the production of precision tooling and delivers the accuracy, finish, and steel properties required for demanding tooling applications. Tools made with Mantle have molded millions of parts while reducing lead times, cutting costs, and solving labor shortages. And now, let's get started. Today, we're joined by two speakers, Luke Thiel, Manufacturing Engineering Manager at Spectrum Plastics Group, a DuPont business, and Ethan Raito, Director of Marketing at Mantle Inc. With a diverse background spanning design, quality, project management, R&D, and engineering, Luke Thiel provides technical solutions to complex problems. His extensive experience enables him to drive innovation and efficiency in manufacturing processes. Ethan Raito has extensive experience in technical marketing for design and manufacturing projects. He previously ran the technical marketing team at Desktop Metal, a 3D printing manufacturer focused on volume production. Before that, Ethan worked on the rapid prototyping team at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, where he worked on the laser communication system for the NASA Orion mission. Now, we'll begin with today's presentation. Luke?
Thank you for the introduction, Sam. Both Ethan and I are very excited to share with everyone the technology and successes we've seen with accelerating medical device development through the use of metal 3D printed tooling. Just to give you a bit of an idea of what we're going to be covering, we'll start with some quick intros of both Spectrum and Mantle, a deeper dive into Spectrum with metal 3D printing and tooling, detailed information about Mantle and their technology, and finally some real-world applications of how this technology has impacted Spectrum's ability to launch new products into the market faster. I hope you find this presentation enjoyable, so sit back and relax, and we'll be happy to answer any questions, like Sam said, that come up at the end of the webinar. With that, I'll hand off to Ethan to introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks for that quick introduction there, Luke and Sam. But my name is Ethan Raito. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Mantle. Thank you very much for giving us an hour out of your day. Hopefully this is successful and a useful use of your time. As Sam said, I have pretty extensive experience in technical marketing. My background is actually in engineering, which is why I've really dove in deep with some technical products. Excited to be chatting about this today, and hopefully we share some relevant examples. Just to give you a little bit more of an introduction to Mantle, on the next slide here, and we'll cover a lot more about Mantle later on. But Mantle's goal is really to help automate your toolmaking processes. We do this by printing precision mold components with really unmatched accuracy, surface finish, and tool steel performance that allow you to eliminate many of the time-consuming and costly processes of a traditional toolmaking process, like a rough milling, like EDM, and we'll look at some examples of that later on. But one thing that I think is really important to know about Mantle is that we designed our system specifically for this application, specifically for injection mold tooling, and you'll see some of those features and explain some of them, decisions we made specifically for this market and to meet the needs of tooling, which is a very, very challenging one, as Luke will share some of those requirements. We're going to get a lot more into Mantle later on, but I think right now Luke's going to share a little bit more about Spectrum and what they do and how they're incorporating Mantle.
Yes. Thank you, Ethan. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Luke Thiel. I'm the manufacturing engineering manager at Spectrum Plastics in our Minneapolis site. So as such, I oversee the manufacturing engineers, process engineers, and automation engineers. And so my background is mechanical engineering, and I've been in the plastics industry for nearly 10 years and have been with Spectrum for 5 of those years in various roles. So with that, my current responsibilities are new product development, sustaining production and operations, continuous improvement, and of course, innovation and new technology implementation. So to give you a better snapshot of who Spectrum is, we are over 2,200 employees across 19 different sites, spanning the US, Canada, Mexico, Costa Rica, Malaysia, and Ireland, with a combined 1 million plus square feet of manufacturing space. I don't want to go spending too much time in diving into all the Spectrum markers, but to give you a high-level overview, we do a lot of polymer-based processing, predominantly in molding and extrusion, and our products can be broken down into 5 different categories. The first is fluid management. So this is primarily medical tubing comprised of high-pressure braided tubing, wire encapsulated tubing, multi-lumen tubing, co-extrusion and striping, solvent bonding, and others. The second category is interventional and surgical technologies. This is primarily a culmination of our vast catheter capabilities with steerable catheter systems, high temperature extrusions like PEEK, medical balloons, dilator sheaths, and precision extrusion. Third category is specialty molding. This is where my site at Minneapolis fits. At our site, we mold a lot of lactide-based bioresorbables and implantables, in some cases with calcium phosphate to help with bone growth. Also on the specialty side, we deal a lot with high-temp materials such as PEEK, polysulfone, glass-filled Ultem, except for polyarylamide. We do insert molding and, of course, quick-turn tooling and supporting of prototyping and development, which is what we'll dig into in a minute. Fourth category is specialty and medical flexibles. This is primarily our packaging business comprised of polyliners, custom bags and pouches, and clamshells. And just a side fun fact, Spectrum is an official authorized distributor of Tyvek. And the final category is advanced technologies. This covers all of our miscellaneous technologies and capabilities, such as laser processing and drilling of both plastics and metals, secondary processes, automation, and additive manufacturing with the ability uniquely to extrude 3D printing filament in any thermoplastic material, which is pretty cool technology. So who are we? I understand that it's a lot to take in, but the punchline is that Spectrum Plastic Group aims to be the first call solutions provider for development through scaled manufacturing of critical polymer-based components and devices for medical and other demanding markets requiring quality, responsiveness, innovation, and technical expertise. So now you have an understanding of who Spectrum is as a whole. Let's zoom in and dig into what has been happening at Minneapolis. So we have 64 presses ranging from 12 to 610 tons throughout a manufacturing floor of 105,000 square feet, with over 8,000 of that dedicated clean room class 8, and about half of that able to be certified to class 7. We also do catheter assembly, metal and plastic 3D printing, and nearly all secondary operations, including laser marking, sonic welding, machining, etc. So Spectrum introduces products that cover the body from head to toe, from our bone screws and orthopedics to our anastomotic couplers for vein reconstruction. And I'm ready with our technical and clinical expertise to partner with you to develop and launch your products in various sectors such as advanced surgery and intervention. Our sweet spot is the low to mid volume production ranging in from 1,000 to 250,000 parts per year, although we do have a few product lines that span into the millions. We're also ISO 1345 certified and have micromolding capabilities. And as a result, Spectrum really is your one-stop shop to develop your products from idea to production. So with all this experience in medical product development, Let's discuss more about what we've learned about the challenges of getting products across the finish line. So we know that we can move pretty fast in early stages. A quick CAD model adjustment here, another rapid 3D print there. But when you start to get into the design verifications, this is where things start to slow down. Getting product into the end use material, getting the quantity of parts required for distribution testing, age testing, biocompatibility, the you name it testing. And then you get into a production representative process, and this all takes time. And so why is it so slow? The answer is you just need tooling. So in traditional product development, we can generate a CAD model, and with that 3D print a model for form and fit. And this gets us fast parts, but does not completely validate the design or the process. So then we go into other forms of manufacturing to get more parts quick. And that's either with machining or prototype tooling or going to a prototype service. But this still doesn't completely validate the final manufacturing process. So then we go into steel tooling, which provides a perfect material representation, a geometry representation, and using the design verification and validation. So what would happen if we get the steel tooling early in development? Well, essentially you would be able to validate end-use material while validating in production-grade tooling steel, as well as a production-grade process verifying mold dimensions, injection molding process parameters, verifying shrink rates, production output, and dimensional analysis, all in a tool that can be bridged to high-volume production with the same material, essentially de-risking all early development work. So why do we even need this middle step? If steel tooling is so great, why wouldn't everyone use it early in development? Well, because it's slow. Steels are hard materials to work with, and this limits the speed at which we can develop production processes with. That is until now. With the help of Mantle and their 3D printer, we now have the ability to print fast tooling to represent final production processes with H13 steels at a rate that is 40% faster than traditional tool making methodologies. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Ethan to discuss more in depth their technology and how it makes all this possible.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. So as Luke was just sharing, tool making is really critical for all product development processes. It's an inevitable. So how do we speed up that really timely process? If you look at a conventional tool making process like we're seeing here, there's a ton of steps involved to make a tool because of how complex, how precise, and some of the requirements, as well as having to work with these very specialized steels that are just not easy to process. So everything from sourcing raw materials to rough milling and fixturing to hard milling, and then of course, very common in molded parts are very intricate and fine, deep features that require EDM or synchro EDM processes, which everyone knows are very costly and time consuming because of just the way those processes work. So the goal of Mantle here is really to eliminate many of these costly and time consuming steps. So you go directly from your digital CAD file to something that's hopefully 50, 75, even 90% of the way complete, and generally just requires a little bit of final finishing. And we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but generally we're seeing our customers just do a little bit of grinding to square up the block, finish ejector pins, but you're shooting parts right off of the as printed surface finish and able to produce some EDM sharp features, which we'll share here in a second how that's actually working. So our system really includes 3 pieces of equipment: hardware, software, and then our tool steels. And it's a little bit of a unique process, so I'll walk you through how this works, and I'll show you actually a video a little bit later on showing that, but it's a 3-step process that all really starts with our paste material. The paste is similar to the consistency of a toothpaste, so it's a viscous material, but what this paste actually is metal powder mixed with solvent and binder. So we mix all of this together into a paste. You can see it being extruded out there on the left, but essentially, that's what we ship to our customers is these cartridge of this paste. That's this kind of combination. And the first step in this process of actually processing this paste is to print it. We start by just extruding this material out of a nozzle. It's viscous enough that it can be easily extruded and just be essentially extruded out layer by layer. It's very easy to flow, and of course there's no loose metal powder because all of that metal powder is mixed in with the paste. The next step of the process here is to actually dry this material. So we're just doing this with heat. Heat lamp comes over the layer, and it actually removes the solvent out of the part. It firms it up a little bit and improves the green body density. So we go from this sort of flowable paste, toothpaste-like material to something more like a dense foam. After drying is complete, we then go in and shape. So we're actually building our printer inside of an existing RoboDrill style CNC. So we're using cutting tools to actually come and refine the shape. So this allows us to really exceed the surface finish and the precision possible with most metal 3D printing technologies by coming in and actually shaping the part with the traditional CNC cutting tools. And what's really cool is that we're actually doing this every single layer. So we're printing, drying, and machining, printing, drying, and machining every single layer, which of course enables us to do these really, really deep ribs and features that wouldn't be possible with traditional machining because you just wouldn't be able to get a tool into that deep. We'll show a quick video here of actually how this is working, and I'll talk you through a little bit of this. If you want to play this for me, Luke, you can see just extruding that paste out of a nozzle to really lay down that material. Then we're going to come through and dry it. So that's removing that solvent out. And we're doing this on an every single layer basis just to dry that material. And then we're going to machine it. So every single layer, we're going to do that print, dry, machine, print, dry, machine to get to build a layer. And that's going to build up the part over and over and over again. So we're really combining both an additive and subtractive approach here to kind of get the best of both worlds. And you'll see a little time lapse here of building up that part, repeating those over and over and over again. Awesome. Is complete. After the part is printed, then we go into a sintering step. So here it's being placed into a furnace. The furnace gets just below the melting temperature of the material. Our furnace gets up to 1400 degrees Celsius. Any of that binder that was left in the paste is removed, and the part sinters, where the metal powder is fusing together, and the part shrinks about 9% of this process, but what comes out is a dense, strong steel component. You can see the final part has very isotropic material properties. There's no residual stresses from that sintering process, and what comes out is tool steel. You can see on the next slide here, it's a little harder to get a camera into a high temperature furnace, but I have a video here just showing some of the sintering process of essentially you're just simply placing the part into this furnace. You close it up. This takes 36 to 42 hours. It gets hot. The material shrinks about 9% and it densifies into a dense, strong steel component. Cool. One thing I wanted to really reiterate here is that one of the coolest and most beneficial parts of our process is the ability to do this shaping refinement, but when it's in a very soft state. So we're actually using standard cutting tools inside of our machine. There's 10 of those tools we're using today. But since we're only machining layer by layer, as well as essentially a paste material, there's very, very low cutting forces on the tools, which allow us to use some very, very small cutting tools. The smallest tool we're using today is a 6 thou ball and mill, so 0.006 inches in diameter, and that's going to leave a 3 thou radius. But we can use those very, very small tools, but in very, very deep ribs. And I just have an example sort of here. My kind of sample part here where I oversimplified the process a little bit, but essentially every layer is being milled flat and every 10 layers are contour milled. So essentially you can see that we're building up the part layer by layer or millimeter by millimeter. And you can see that we can use these small cutting tools to get really, really deep down inside of the part because we're doing this print machine process that we don't have to worry about that. And you can see that really, really small cutting tool on the screen here that allows you to achieve essentially EDM sharp features without having to burn and use graphite and things like that, which is really, really beneficial to our customers because of the time and cost associated with a sinker EDM process. One thing I just quickly, we're going to show some more examples specific to Spectrum later on, but it's one thing to have a really fancy print process. A lot of people have these really smart, unique ways of doing metal 3D printing, but what it actually matters is that it's saving time and cost for our customers. This is just a couple examples here of examples where saving, over 50% of the time and cost to build precision tools, which ultimately is what matters. It's one thing to have some cool technology. It's another thing to make a real impact. And, that's really what this technology is doing and doing for Spectrum as well. And I know Luke's going to share some more examples of how that's happening. Oh, just to continue here, the two materials, we really commonly get asked about this. The H13 tool steel, which I know Luke mentioned, really a workhorse of the injection molding industry. 42 Rockwell after sintering can be heat treated up to 50. Very, very durable material, really well known for its high abrasion resistance and high volume molding applications. And then coming very soon, we have this 420 stainless steel, which has been really, really highly requested of our medical customers, of people like Spectrum, because of its ability for corrosion resistance with high hardness, which is really, really desired in medical molding applications. So two of these main steels today. Another very common question is, can I post-process these materials? You said we get you 75% of the way there, 50% of the way there. Absolutely, you can do any of the finishing steps that I think are on the next slide here, without any changes to standard operating procedures, which is really, really important. I don't know if Luke can chime in on any of that, but I know that milling, drilling, grinding, tapping, any of those processes can be done without any changes to standard operating procedures. So if you do need to do a little touch up, you need to grind something, get a little bit better tolerance, texturing, welding, anything, all of that can be done without standard operating procedures. I don't know if Luke, if you have anything to add there of how your shop has found our material.
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked with all of our tooling engineers, and they've said this is just as easy to work with as standard steel. So nothing out of the
Yeah.
ordinary.
Yeah, I know that's really important to ensure that you can do that when you need to. And then one of the most common questions we get is, is this material durable? Is it a tool steel? Is it just for prototyping? This is just a quick example of a production molding application. This is actually the thumbstick for your deodorant stick that you would see. Hopefully, we all use this morning to advance that deodorant up. This was a production tool. They've actually been running this over 1.65 million cycles, and it's still running with no signs of wear. So just an example of, sure, you can absolutely use it for early in the production process, for quick turn prototypes, for product development, things like that. But H13 is a durable, rugged tool steel that can absolutely be used in volume. So just a quick example of some of the higher volume stuff that's been possible with Mantle.
Sure. So let's get into the details of walking through how Spectrum specifically has progressed with Mantle and this technology. So phase one consisted of gaining an understanding of the technology, trying out for ourselves to validate if the claims were true. We did this by designing a tool that molds standard holds clips out of a generic polyethylene, and the results were very promising. Our tool room estimated that after receiving the material, rough machining, heat treating, grinding, making the electrodes, EDMing and programming and polishing, the lead time would be about 11 days, which is quite fast for a new tool, we understand, but the geometry for this tool was quite simple, and that was intentional for R&D purposes. But so this is for the cavity and core blocks to be used in a mud set. So with Mantle, we were able to print the cavity, print the core, sinter, and then grind, wire, and polish all within 8 days. Now, some of you are probably thinking 3 days of savings. Is that really that big of a deal? Well, this is where we start to getting into some of those intangibles of metal 3D printing. So if you play out how that 11 days sits on a standard work week calendar, you'll notice that it actually takes 18 calendar days to complete this work with including time for weekends and potentially even more with holidays. So now with Mantle is able to print on its own, unsupervised. You can begin a print on Friday and let that continue the course over the weekend. So, and what you'll see is by utilizing this strategy, your 18 days reduces to 11. So effectively your 3 days of savings is actually closer to 7 days of savings. And this is a good time to point out additional benefits of what that actually means. I'm presenting this from an engineering perspective, but I think you can all certainly understand the implications on cost of not having a toolmaker working full-time on a project and having a machine get you nearly finished product in a simple way, simply make some finishing steps to get that tool across the finish line. This also de-risks from personnel issues, short staffing, sickness, mistakes, miscalculations, essentially removing human error from the first part of the equation. So at this point, we've mastered the technology, and it's time to start building tools for our customers. And I've simplified the geometry in this example on the screenshots on the right of this part because I didn't want to disclose everything from our customer. But essentially, the part geometry is a cylindrical part with some threads along the outside. And so, again, our tool room took an estimation on this work taking about 12 to 14 days. And playing this out, Mantle was able to complete this work in 9 days. So to continue off the same point of the fact that Mantle will work weekends without questioning, it is important to point out that the reduction in man hours as a whole throughout the process. So with traditional tool making methodologies for a standard prototype tool, you may be looking at lead times between 3 to 4 weeks. And with Mantle, we were able to bring this lead time in as little as 12 days and significantly reduce the amount of tool making time involved, effectively reducing the cost. So what would take 65 hours of toolmaker time now only takes 14. So this can also be translated to improved capacity in tool making as well, additionally de-risking your precious timelines. So now this is also a good time to point out that with traditional tool making for a part, a gun drill would have been used to machine these water lines, meaning that's going to be in Cartesian, X, Y, Z axis. With Mantle, we're able to design water lines within the 3D print that are contoured along the surface of the part to provide conformal cooling. For those who aren't familiar with conformal cooling, it's the process where cooling lines remain a uniform distance from the part surface to provide even and predictable cooling, allowing designers to better control factors like shrink and allow molders to achieve more efficient cooling and potentially reduce cycle time. Additionally, I'd also like to highlight the significance of the ability to print in H13 tool steel. I know Ethan kind of touched on this, but I'd like to continue to stress that there's a lot of metals that can be used in injection molding, but for the most common ones are aluminum, which we're all familiar with. This is primarily used for prototype tools because they're cheap and easy to machine quickly. But because aluminum is not super durable, it doesn't hold up for that repeated abuse in injection molding, and therefore is rarely used for production. So if you want to take it up a step from that, then you can go to P20, which is a versatile and cost-effective steel. P20 is general purpose steel, known for toughness, machinability, and its ability to be heat treated. But P20 is usually pre-hardened around 30 to 40 HRC, allowing it to be used directly after machining without additional heat treatment. So it has good wear resistance, making it suitable for moderate production volumes. But when you need that next level of toughness, though, H13, the one that Mantle prints in, is the true workhorse of injection molding. It's excellent heat resistance, super high toughness, high wear resistance, and a higher hardness of that 45 to 52 HRC that we mentioned earlier. So H13 is durable enough to withstand high volume production. Now, we don't necessarily advertise for such volumes because it is a prototype tool, but the quality of steel specifically for injection molding is definitely worth noting. So back to where we left off with how this specific case played out, it's very similar to our initial testing, and that the 3 days of savings again turned out to 7 days of savings, allowing our customer to get their products out the door much faster. Leading into our final one, the final case I'd like to discuss is not specific for injection molding, but it's definitely worth noting. So we had a catheter tipper that was printed in as little as 3.5 days. Now, this isn't much to balk at, as the geometry is not that complicated and pretty easy to machine, but what I wanted to draw attention to is the fact that if you were to print 8 of these at once, the time to print would only increase by 1 day, with the machining step efficiencies applied in some of those net gains. So and I want to take a little sidebar to speak specifically to the design engineers listening to this call, because this is where I came from. And how many of you have been working through a design iteration to dial in that exact interference fit, that snap fit feel, or that ergonomic feel, and how many times within that have these iterations cost you valuable time making modification after modification? Or how many times have you gotten a part in your hand and thought, dang, if I had one more design iteration, I could make this feel so much better, but your manager put his foot down and you now have no more time or funding for product development? Well, with Mantle, you can print multiple iterations at once to allow for rapid back-to-back molding for product testing to find that final design result that suits your specific needs, preventing you from running into constraints, both in cost and time. So with that, I'd love to ask you guys how Spectrum can partner with you to develop your products and get you on the fast track to product launch. Of course, like we said in the beginning, if you have any questions, we'd love to connect with you guys. Here's our contact info for you guys to address. And if you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone. Hopefully this was valuable.
Yeah, thank you to both of you for your thorough and informative presentation. Once again, don't forget that the presentation will be archived on mpomag.com for a year. Now it's time for our question and answer session. We'll try to get as many questions as possible. So here we go. The first question, and either of you can jump in or discuss or whatever you want to do to best answer the question. But our first question is, are there limitations to what plastics can be molded using Mantle tools?
Yeah, I suppose I can start with this one. At this point, yes, there's not really any limitations other than outside of what our specific machine capabilities are. So at our plant, we currently are able to do just about any thermoplastic, and we talked about those early on. And so we start getting into those high temperature peaks, and so we're not limited with that. And we start getting into those bioresorbables, we're not limited with that. So just about any thermoplastic.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big values of Mantle, especially in the product development and prototyping stages, is the ability to mold PEEK, acetal, radel, these highly abrasive things that are or high temperature things that would be very challenging and difficult to do with an aluminum or a different prototype tool, especially as you're moving into production where you're definitely going to go with a steel tool, understanding those thermal properties and the molding cycle and the molding process to ensure that not only does your part design work, but it works in production in a steel tool. Because I think, as Luke and I chatted about, is aluminum is great. It's cheap and easy to machine, and if you can get away with it, that's great for you. But when you move to production, it's dramatically different molding experience going from aluminum to a tool steel. So that benefit of being able to use H13 during that prototype stage, so the part's going to shrink the same, it's going to mold the same, and things like that. So long-winded answer, I guess, from us, but there's no limitations we found so far, thanks to that H13 material.
We don't like long-winded, we like thorough. It was a very
There
thorough.
you go. Thorough is a good way of putting it.
All right, our next question is, using Mantle's tools, what is the tolerance you expect on your molded parts?
I can start with that. Just each print that we do, we try to take a tool that allows us to see where were we expected to land and where do we actually land, and kind of evaluate those discrepancies. And so what we found that is we've been able to hit 2 thou per linear inch. So if you have a part that's 2 inches long, we'll be within 4 thou. If you have a 1 inch part, then you'll be within 2 thou. In general, there's a little bit dependent on part geometry, and so as we continue to build more and more parts, we start to learn where we can be a little bit more accurate, where we can treat those CAD models, so that when we do go through that shrink during that sintering process, we can kind of dial in where that's going to end up. But
Yeah,
what we've been advertising at this point is 2 thou per inch.
and to add to what Luke's saying, it can be a little difficult to understand, but where we lose tolerances in the Mantle process is during that sintering step. We're machining the part, we can get to those machine level tolerances, but then you put it in that furnace, it's going to shrink that 9%. And how closely can you predict, where it's going to end up? And we feel we've done a pretty good job in getting close, but that is why, generally a little bit of grinding afterwards, finishing those ejector pans that are plus or minus nothing. But controlling that sintering process is where we spend a lot of time trying to predict exactly what that shrink's going to be. So hopefully you end up as close as possible to the final result.
Very good, thank you. Our next question, what is the maximum part size that you can mold using this tooling?
Yeah, so I could quickly just add some of the physical limitations. So the machine itself has a build volume of 8 by 8 by 6. So 200 by 200 by 150 millimeters roughly. But as we just mentioned, that tolerance does scale with size. So we're sort of seeing an ideal part size more in the 5, 6 and smaller range, because as the bigger your part gets, the more out of tolerance it's going to be. The longer it's going to take, the more expensive it's going to be. So I think it's both a question of what's possible, but also what makes sense. In that, does it make sense to print an 8-inch part that takes 5 days, but it's going to be plus or minus, whatever, maybe not. Maybe if you're doing conformal cooling, but it's very application dependent. Again, a thorough answer, and I'll let Luke chime in on what they've seen and what they've found.
Yeah, we often find, we know what the build plate dimensions are, and the 6 by 6 by 8. And so what happens is people say, well, my part's 6 inches long, why can't we use the Mantle? Well, you also have to have a wall there, so you can't print all the way out to the end. And so that's kind of the only thing that we had to guide a little bit, is communicating what effectively that wall thickness is at the end, and that's gonna be a little bit part specific and material specific, but in general, that's where we've landed.
And I think to add to that too is, I know Spectrum and people in general are getting a little creative here, because what Mantle is good at is printing feature detail and printing, complex features and things like that. We're not so good at printing blocks. So, in general, looking at mold designs and understanding, do we have to have all of this geometry? Can we shrink it? Things like that, to really take advantage of the speed and the process there, rather than just printing big bulky sections, because that's how, with machining, you want to leave those features, because why take them away? That's going to add machining times. We're the opposite of that. So I think there's a give and take there to understand how to really optimize parts for the process.
Very good, thanks so much. Next question, what sort of surface finish can you get on a molded part? Whoever wants to jump in on that one first.
Yeah, I guess I've bounced between A1 and A2 finishing, and I guess you can kind of chime on this with Ethan, but you know, a little bit of that comes down to, yes, you are shrinking down a little bit, but with that sintering process, you're pulling out a little bit, so it is a more porous version, but it's, you know, left with 96, 98% of that H13 steel. So the combat you'd be, or the effect you'd be fighting is that porousness of pulling out some of that binder and sintering media. But we've seen for sure A2, and I guess we haven't really tried to polish all the way down to A1 because, you know, with these prototype tools, a lot of people don't necessarily require that high level of visual effect. But I guess Ethan, you can let me know if you've seen any getting to an A1 at this point.
Yeah, so probably should have said this earlier on, but essentially the as printed surface finish on a Mantle tool is we say it's a D2, very similar to a fine sinker EDM. So the result on a molded part is going to be sort of a matte finish, and that's if you were to not touch the face at all. So, you know, matte finish is fine for many applications. It's similar to a sinker EDM finish. If you needed a better finish on the part, you can absolutely polish to an A2, and we've seen our customers do that time and time again. The challenge with 3D printing that people normally see is, especially with some level of porosity, like Luke said, is they're looking for pitting. And that, am I going to polish into voids that are going to make the surface impossible to polish? Luckily with Mantle, you know, while there is some level of porosity, it's very small and distributed. So when you're polishing, you don't tend to see it. It's too small to see, and it doesn't impact the surface finish. That being said, A1 finish is a whole nother level of that. From what I've been told, you look at an A1 finish the wrong way, all of a sudden it's an A2. So I'm not even sure we've necessarily tried, but I think for what we're doing in A2 is totally fine. We have customers doing optical components, clear components, things like that, and they've said it polishes really well. So as printed, you're getting that D2 matte surface finish. If you need to polish it, you can go all the way up to that A2. Or
All right, very good. Thanks so much. Unfortunately, however, that's all the time we have for today's presentation. If we didn't get to one of your questions, you can reach out to either of our presenters via the email links on the page. I'd like to thank our presenters, Luke Thiel and Ethan Raito, for their insights. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Spectrum Plastics Group, a DuPont business, and Mantle Inc. for their support. Finally, I'd like to thank you, the viewer, for attending this session. I hope you found it to be a valuable experience.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you.